Today, we begin a new study, and we're going to take certain parts of the book of Ecclesiastes. Still wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is Job, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Psalms, Proverbs. Those are the pieces that make up wisdom literature. Now, in this wisdom literature of Ecclesiastes, it means the preacher or the teacher. Now, let me just give you some words and some facts, and I want you to watch them as they pop up over and over again. For instance, he is going to use his title as the king at least 12 times as he writes Ecclesiastes. He wants us to know who it is. This is King Solomon, who is going to write the book of Ecclesiastes. He is the preacher. He is the teacher. And he's over a large kingdom. Now, sometimes we forget just how large this kingdom of David had become. And now Solomon is going to inherit not only the kingdom, but he's going to inherit the job of building the temple. So David could not build the temple not because of his adultery with Bathsheba. I missed that on a test one time. That's why I know. It's because David was a man of war that he could not build the temple. Well, Solomon has not only that task of building the temple, he has the task of running the government as the king. Now just imagine the size of army that he had to maintain and keep organized to move at any time against the enemies who were coming. Just imagine the taxation that he had to see that was collected to support the kingdom, to support the army. Just imagine how many people he had to employ and had to help. Just imagine all that was going on in Solomon's life, the luxury of the buildings that he built must have been just absolutely unbelievable. As I study the temple and the building of the temple, it must have been the most beautiful building that's ever been built on planet Earth, and the most expensive building that's ever built on planet Earth. So here is Solomon, who has inherited all of this. And 12 times he talks about being the king. Being the king. Not only the teacher, but being the king. I jotted down a couple other facts I want you to hear. For instance, he's going to talk about profit, or making advance in wealth, advantage, gain. What's left over? However you choose to count profit, what's left over? It's like the immigrant who came to America, started a business. The business grew. His son couldn't understand all it was about, and his father said, "Let me illustrate it to you." He brought out an old pair of trousers or an old pair of pants that he had worn when he started the business, and they were tattered. He said, "Now, I started with no money whatsoever. So you take all the money that I've accumulated, minus these old trousers. And that's how God has blessed us." You and I spend so much time complaining about what we don't have that we don't take the time to thank God for what we do have. Everything we have, above nothing, is a gift of God. The very air we breathe, the lungs with which we breathe the air, the oxygen out of the air, is a gift of God. In the midst of all of this, he talks about profit. By the way, he uses the word for profit, leftover, 10 times in Ecclesiastes. And he uses the opposite word, vanity. He will play the two off one another, vanity and profit. He uses the word for vanity 23 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. And he does not even come to the point of exhaustion in them. So here he is. He's only a man. He's filled with all of the things that men are filled with. Much of his life was easy. Much of his life was very prominent in pomp and circumstances that surrounds a king. And he begins and ends with the declaration that all is vanity. Look at this, if you would please, beginning in chapter 1. I want to look first, let's look first verse 2, and then we'll jump down to verse 11. Verse 11 and 12. Verses 1 and 2. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now this was before the dividing of the kingdom, so it was Solomon. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What Solomon is saying, is there anything good about life? I'm going to try to find out what's good about life. It looks to me that everything is in vain. Everything you do is going to come to nothing. It's in vain. One generation passes away, another comes, but the earth abides forever. Now drop down to verse 12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I gave my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all of the works that are done under the sun. Now, that phrase, under the sun, can be translated on earth. Everything on earth I've looked at. Everything I've tried to understand. And behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight. That which is wanting cannot be numbered. I commune with my own heart. Well, let's take those verses first and look at them. In these verses, he's going to say, I've tried education. I've tried everything I know to try to find the meaning of life. And it's all in vain. It's all vanity. I've tried pleasure. I've tried education. I've tried everything I know to try, and it's still all vanity. Now, it's an interesting thing that as he goes through all of this, he comes to the end of all of these things, and we'll see later, I'll repeat it again, I'm sure, more than one time. He sees that the end of all vanity is death, and nothing. That's the equalizer of life, is death. All men are going to die. That's the equalizer. That's the only thing that's not vain. That's the only thing that's not vanity. Death is the equalizer of mankind. So he has the resources to do all that he is going to try to find out about what life's all about. The resources worth living. He can experiment with life. Great pleasure, great accumulation, and it feels like I'm just grasping for the wind in all of this. Now, I'm going to press this thing from all sides of the issue, he says. I'm going to find out. The teacher is the king of Israel. Wisdom literature. In wisdom literature, by the way, I meant to mention this earlier. In wisdom literature, the one key idea is the fear of God. That's a key idea. Or negligence of God is the opposite. Now, when I talk about fear, I'm not talking about waking up in the middle of the night, hearing noises and being afraid. That's what I'm talking about, the awesome awareness of who God is. One of my favorite, I think one of the places I first memorized because I was so intrigued with it and had started using it, especially at some funeral services, is Psalm 1. And I don't think it's incidental that Psalm 1 is foundation to all the rest of the Psalms. Blessed is the man that walks not. Blessed is the man that walks not. He's going to tell us. He walks not in the presence. He sits not in the seat of the scoffer. He's like a tree. Now, we can only understand this if we've ever been to the Bible lands and see the arid country and how important it is to find water. Water is the resource for Israel to survive. He is planted like a tree by living water and brings forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither. Whatsoever he does shall prosper. Then he comes and flips the coin. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind blows away. That simply means when they were winnowing the grain, they'd throw it up in the air and the wind would blow away the chaff and the grain would fall to the ground. It should be like the chaff. And then he goes on to say, the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment. Sinners in the congregation of the righteous. Now here's the kicker. God knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. So this sets the stage for this man Solomon, who wants to understand what is there about life. Only man has a history. All of the other insects, animals of the world have a life cycle. We have a history, and that history goes on with us wherever we go. Those are the givens of life. Now, one of the givens of life for Solomon was he was born into wealth. He inherited the kingdom from David that was expanded under David beyond anything Israel has ever known. But he says, even with all this, and with this understanding, I still know that man has a history, the givens of life. You did not choose your mother and father. That's a given of life. You did not choose to be born in Anson, West Virginia, the coal camp of Gully Mountain Mining Company. Like, I did not choose that for myself. I did not choose Frank and Louise to be my father and mother. I did not choose them. I did not choose to go to school, primarily, all but about 3 years of elementary school. I went to a 3-room schoolhouse where there were 2 grades in every room. So I'm saying to you that there are givens in life. I did not choose that for myself. I did not choose to be a coal miner's son. I did not choose that for myself. But listen, now the flip side of that is, if I could have chosen my parents, I would have chosen Frank and Louise. They were good parents. They were good parents. Not without fault, not without flaw, but they also had flawed children. But I loved my mom and dad. I cared about them. They loved me, cared for me. Just a little side note. They illustrate something of my mother's character. I wanted to play baseball one summer. But in order to play baseball, you had to have your own glove. I didn't have a glove. I told my mother that I wanted to play baseball, but I didn't have a glove. You know what she did? She took in ironing. Now that's when you ironed on a board with an iron. She took in ironing from the neighbors to get enough money to buy me a baseball glove. I loved my mother. Not because of what she did for me in the glove, but for the sacrifice she was willing to make me happy and to give me opportunity. That's what Solomon is trying to say. I inherited all of this. I hope to build on it, but I inherited all of it. But it's still vanity of vanities. All is vanity. So here he is, this life cycle that animals go through. Someone in one of the commentators used the analogy of the bird. The bird sings at the end of the day. But do you know everything he's been through the day? He's had to protect the eggs, had to protect the females, and had to watch out for the animals that would devour him. And yet, having done all of this in a day's time, he sings at the end of the day. I wonder if there's not a lesson in that for us. There was for Solomon. So here he is. In all of his wisdom, he has a fear of God. Knowing the power of God, knowing all of this, there's still a vexation in his spirit. He still can't piece it all together. Even using his ability and utilizing all of the resources at his disposal, he still comes to the conclusion that life is vanity. We cannot depend on ourselves. We cannot depend on our resources to find the meaning of life. Notice the idea, to the conclusion he comes, that which is crooked cannot be made straight. That which is wanting cannot be numbered. So here he is, looking at life, saying if it's crooked, it's crooked. You can't make it straight. Well, that's an interesting carryover into John the Baptist. John the Baptist said, I've come for one thing, to make the way straight for the Messiah. To get the potholes filled, to get the bumps taken out. I have come to make straight the way for the Messiah. So Jesus straightway made his way into the earth, onto earth, and became our Savior and our Lord because of John the Baptist making the way straight. You can make the crooked straight. You can make the crooked straight. I fell when I was about 10 years old. Slapped my arm. We were playing Tarzan, swinging on some rafters. I slapped my arm when I fell and had a compound fracture, bone coming out of the skin. It was a mess. It's 50 miles from our house over the mountains to Charleston, West Virginia. Somewhere around an hour and a half to 2 hour drive through the mountains. I thought my mother was going to pass out more than me. One of the first things the doctor said, I'm going to try to set it, but I think when he's just a little stronger, I'll have to go in and make it straight by putting in pins. You can make things straight. My arm's straight. Now, is he talking about morally crooked? You can even make morally crooked straight. Solomon was missing something here. You can't make the crooked straight. Yes, you can make the crooked straight. in Christ Jesus. He said it's just like grasping for the wind. Now he comes to talk about his wealth. Let's look at verse 18 to 21. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun on earth, because I should have it unto man, and that after, and shall be after me. And who knows whether he shall be a wise man or a foolish man? Yet all that have rule over my labor, wherein I have labored, wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun, this is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labors which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge, and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and great evil. Now let's try to dissect what he's talking about here. I made some notes. He's talking about his wealth, what he has and what he is now accumulating in addition to what he inherited. Here's some things about wealth. Number one, you can't keep it. You can't keep it. You can't keep it, but you can use it. You can buy groceries to support your body. You can use it. You can pay for air conditioning and heating for your house. You can use it to keep you warm. You can use it to buy food. You can use it for support here. And so wealth, you have to use it. You can't keep it. Number two, you cannot protect it. You can't protect your wealth. Government can encroach on your wealth. Tragedy can encroach on your wealth. Stupidity can encroach on your wealth. So many things can encroach on your wealth. You are going to have to leave it. You can't keep it. You're going to have to leave it. And that's what Solomon is saying. It's been tough to make it, and now I'm going to have to leave it. It seems like to me that's vanity. Now, the one thing you can be sure of, whatever you leave behind, those who inherit it are not going to treat it like you. Now, I don't want to sound cynical, because I'm not cynical. That's not my nature. But I want to tell you what I have observed in my 65 plus years of ministry. When those of this generation, my generation, and the generation ahead of me, when those of us who have worked hard to accumulate wealth, whatever it might be, may not be much, it may be a lot. But if you think your kids are going to treat your wealth the same way you treated it and gained it, I can tell you, it will be rare if that happens. And that's what's troubling to Solomon. Who's going to inherit this vast empire? Who's going to inherit all of this wealth? I can't even be sure that they're going to use it wisely. They're just going to inherit it. You can't take it with you. You have to leave it behind. And so you can't work, you can work to accumulate it, but it's character that matters on how you spend it. Well, the last thing, we can allow our wealth to cause enjoyment and pleasure in our lives. Listen, I've had it both ways. I've had the lean years and I've had the good years. Let me tell you, the good years are better than the lean years. Now, some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You paid a price to get to where you are. There were some lean years. I tell folks sometimes the only thing we had to eat were beans. And that's true. But that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. I still like beans. But you can't take it with you. Somebody's going to inherit. Enjoy your wealth now. Let it bring some pleasure to your life, whatever it is. Don't take the attitude, I'm saving all of this for my kids. Saving all of this for my kids. No. Enjoy some of your wealth now before you go. Enjoy it. Make the world better because of it. Let it improve your character rather than destroy your character. And when you do, you will be pleased. And last thing, let God do something in you rather than for you because of your wealth. So Solomon wants us to know that all is vanity. Someone is going to control yours after you're gone. You can just put it down. And you know from 2 Corinthians, there is that passage, I believe it's in chapter 9, where it says, sow bountifully, reap bountifully. Sow sparingly, reap sparingly. I preached on that not long ago. Let me tell you, when you sow bountifully, there is a sense of joy. Generosity begets generosity. Nancy and I talked about that so much. God would do something good for us. There would be that unexpected thing that came into our life, and she would always say, now, we know that when we give it away, God's going to give it back. And she was right every single time. Generosity begets generosity. Well, Solomon says it's all in vain. We must come to a hopeful time as we study Ecclesiastes. God bless you.